Off-grid homestead, how to make it possible. Off-the-grid living is an alternative to traditional living that has become more popular in recent years. Some people choose to live off the grid because they want to be more self-sufficient, while others do it for environmental reasons. Whatever the reason, there are a few things you should know before starting your own off-grid homestead. In this video, I cover facts, tips, and recommendations related to the off-grid homesteading. I compare several housing solutions and go through the steps of establishing an awesome off-grid homestead. With that said, I highly recommend that you visit our site and read the full article, where I cover all 10 steps for a successful and happy off-grid living. Let's begin. What is off-grid homestead? An off-grid homestead is a property where the home and outbuildings are not connected to utility services, such water, gas, or electricity lines. This type of homestead usually relies on alternative sources of power, like solar, wind, or hydropower, and often has its own water source. While living off-grid can be challenging, it can also be very rewarding. Those who choose to live this way often do so because they want to be more in control of their food supply, energy use, waste management, saving money, living a healthier life and more. Basically, living off-grid is a whole new way to experience life. So now the question is, what are the different types of off-grid homestead? What are the different types of off-grid homestead? There are 5 different ways to live off the grid the right way and enjoy every moment of it. You can base your off-grid homestead in 1. Tiny house. 2. RV. 3. Shipping container. 4. Cabin. 5. Regular-sized house or farmhouse. Let's get to know each option in more detail. Tiny house. One of the most popular homesteading trends in recent years has been the tiny house movement. The average American home is around 2,600 square feet, but the average tiny house is only about 400 square feet. That's a pretty big difference. There are all sorts of reasons why people choose to downsize and live in tiny houses. For some, it's a way to reduce their carbon footprint. Others simply want to simplify their lives and live with less stuff. And then there are those who want to save money on housing costs so they can use that money for other things, like travel. If you're considering going off-grid and homesteading, you might be wondering if it's possible to do so in a tiny house. The answer is yes. It may take a little bit more planning and creativity, but it can definitely be done. However, you don't have to be an expert in home design. Texas Tiny Houses are there to help you. This international company offers excellent floor plans and blueprints for tiny houses. Many of these plans are currently offered with a huge discount, up to 90% off. See the link to Texas Tiny Houses in the description section below this video. RV. RV living has become a popular way to live off the grid. There are many benefits to RV living, including being able to travel and explore new places while still having all the comforts of home. However, there are also some challenges that come with RV living, such as finding parking spots and dealing with bad weather. Here are some tips for making RV living work for you. 1. Find a good place to park your RV. This may seem like an obvious one, but it's important to find a safe and legal place to park your RV before you start living in it full-time. If you're not sure where to look, ask other RVers or check online forums for recommendations. 2. Get organized and plan ahead. When you're living in an RV, space is limited, so it's important to be organized and take all your needs into account. Make sure you have storage containers for all your belongings. And know where everything is so you can easily find it when you need it. 3. Be prepared for bad weather. It's important to be prepared for bad weather. Make sure you have plenty of warm clothing and blankets on hand, as well as emergency supplies in case you get stranded somewhere due to severe weather conditions. You can also install an air conditioner and solve this problem. 4. If you had purchased a land, you can temporarily or permanently park your RV there. This way you can enjoy an instant off-grid homestead without building it and without spending money on gas. Naturally, don't forget to hook the RV to electricity, water, and sewage facilities. Additionally, check with the authorities whether this method of living is permitted by the local laws and regulations. If you're hesitant about investing too much money in an RV, try renting it at first and see how it feels. Share is the leading website for RV rentals. It can help you find a vehicle that perfectly fits your needs and budget. You can choose a drivable or towable RV, select a pickup location, and even browse pet-friendly vehicles. See the link to Share in the description section below. Shipping container. Another option that's worth exploring is using a shipping container as your off-grid homestead. Shipping containers are strong and durable, and can provide a cozy and comfortable place to live while being relatively inexpensive. Here are some things to keep in mind if you're thinking about making a shipping container your home. 1. Insulation is key. A shipping container is made of metal, which means it will conduct heat and cold very well. You'll need to make sure your container is properly insulated in order to keep your living space comfortable year-round. 2. Ventilation is also important. Again, because shipping containers are made of metal, they can get quite stuffy inside if not properly ventilated. Make sure to include windows and/or vents in your plans so that you can let fresh air in and circulate throughout your home. 3. Be prepared for extreme weather conditions. If you're planning on living in a location with extreme temperatures, hot or cold, then a shipping container may not be the best option for you. The metal will conduct temperature extremes, meaning your living space could become unbearably hot or cold depending on the outside conditions. 4. Plan for storage carefully. A shipping container isn't very big, so you'll need to plan carefully for how you'll store all of your belongings, especially if you have a family. Keep in mind that anything stored inside the container will likely get quite hot or cold depending on the weather conditions outside, so only put items inside that can handle those temperature swings without being damaged. Cabin. If you're considering living off the grid on a homestead, there's the traditional and time-tested option, a cabin. For some, the idea of living in a small, isolated space is daunting, but for others it's an exciting adventure. Here are a few things to keep in mind if you're thinking about making the switch to cabin life. 1. You'll need to be comfortable with basic home maintenance and repairs. If something breaks, there's no calling the landlord or handyman, you'll need to be able to fix it yourself. This means having at least a basic understanding of plumbing, electrical work, carpentry, and so forth. 2. Cabin living can be lonely if you're not used to being by yourself for long periods of time. If you enjoy your own company and relish in peace and quiet, then this won't be an issue for you. But if you prefer constant human interaction, living in a cabin might not be the best fit. 3. Be prepared for weather extremes, both hot and cold. If your cabin isn't properly insulated, and many older cabins aren't, winters can be brutal inside as well as out. Make sure you have adequate heating sources and plenty of warm clothing/blankets on hand, and during summer open all windows and cool the cabin. 4. Remember that while living in a cabin may sound romantic and idyllic, it's not always easy. Especially at first. It takes adjustment and getting used to, just like anything else in life. But once you settle into your new lifestyle, I think you'll find it pretty darn wonderful. Regular-sized house or farmhouse. If you don't intend to be limited by the size of your off-grid dwelling, you can opt for a regular house, which can eventually grow to be a farmhouse. There are many people who dream of living in a farmhouse, but few who actually do it. Why? Because it's hard work. But if you're up for the challenge, here's how to make it possible. 1. Find the right property. This is probably the most difficult part. You need to find a piece of land that has enough space for all your animals and crops, and that has good soil conditions. Once you've found the perfect spot, snap it up quickly before someone else does. 2. Get rid of all your stuff. Living in a farmhouse means simplifying your life and getting rid of material possessions that you don't really need. Do a purge of your belongings and only keep what's absolutely essential. 3. Build or buy a suitable house. A farmhouse doesn't have to be big and fancy, in fact, smaller is often better, because it's easier to maintain and heat/cool efficiently. If you're handy with tools, you can build your own house from scratch. Otherwise, there are plenty of prefabricated homes on the market that would be perfect for a homesteader like yourself. 4. Collect rainwater. One way to save money on your water bill is to collect rainwater from gutters and store it in barrels or tanks. This way, you'll have water readily available for watering your plants or washing your animals. Plus, it's free. Visit our site to read the complete guide on how to collect rainwater. How to make an off-grid homestead, from start to finish. I will now share with you 3 steps to make the off-grid homestead possible. I also invite you to visit our site to read the full article where I share all 10 steps to make your dream come true. Find the best possible location. Making the decision to go off-grid is a big one. And, once you've made that decision, there's another big one waiting for you: where will you build your homestead? Where to place your tiny house or farmhouse, which we discussed earlier. The perfect location for an off-grid homestead depends on a lot of factors, from climate to terrain to access to resources. Here are a few things to keep in mind as you search for the perfect spot to call home. Climate. This is probably the most important factor in choosing a location for your off-grid homestead. You'll want to pick a place with a climate that's conducive to growing food and keeping livestock. If you're not sure what kind of climate you can handle, start by doing some research on different climates around the world and see which ones interest you. Then, narrow down your options based on what kinds of plants and animals you want to raise. Terrain. You'll want to pick a spot that has enough flat land for gardening and raising animals, but also has some hills or mountains nearby for hunting and gathering wild foods. If possible, try to find a piece of property that has both types of terrain so you can have the best of both worlds. Access to resources. One of the challenges of living off-grid is having access to all the resources you need without relying on others. That means finding a spot that has plenty of water, either from rainfall or underground, sunlight, for solar power, firewood, for heating and cooking, and building materials, for construction. Of course, it's not always possible to find everything you need in one place, but it's worth considering how close different resources are when making your final decision about where to live. Learn local laws and regulations. When most people think of going off-grid, they often imagine a life free from rules and limitations. However, living off the grid doesn't mean that you are exempt from following local laws and regulations. In fact, it's important to be aware of these laws before making the switch to an off-grid lifestyle. Here are a few things to keep in mind. Zoning laws. These laws vary from place to place, but they generally dictate how land can be used. For example, some areas may not allow for residential use if the property is zoned for agricultural use only. It's important to research zoning laws in your area before making any major changes to your property. Building codes. Even if you're not planning on building anything new on your property, it's still important to be familiar with building codes in your area. This way, you'll know what is and isn't allowed should you need to make any repairs or modifications to your home down the road. Environmental regulations. Depending on where you live, there may be certain environmental regulations that you need to follow. For example, many areas have restrictions on open burning due to air pollution concerns. Others may have limits on how much water you can withdraw from groundwater sources each day. Familiarizing yourself with these types of regulations will help ensure that you are compliant with them moving forward. Establish renewable energy sources. Renewable energy is a hot topic these days, and for good reason. With the ever-increasing costs of traditional forms of energy and the damaging effects they have on our environment, it only makes sense to explore sustainable options that can help us reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. There are many different types of renewable energy sources, but some of the most popular include solar, wind, hydro, and geothermal. Let's get to know it better. Solar power, perhaps the most well-known renewable energy source. Solar panels convert sunlight into electricity, making it a great option for those who live in sunny climates. The main downside to solar power is that it can be expensive to install initially. However, over time solar panel systems will save you money on your energy bills. In some areas, you can even sell the excess power back to the power company. Wind power, another popular choice for renewable energy. Wind turbines capture kinetic energy from the wind and converts it into electricity. One benefit of wind power is that it's relatively easy and inexpensive to set up compared to other renewable energy sources. However, wind power isn't always reliable since there needs to be enough wind present for the turbines to work properly. Hydroelectricity. This method harnesses the power of moving water to generate electricity through a turbine system. Hydroelectricity is considered a very efficient form of renewable energy since there are no emissions associated with it. Some downsides to hydroelectricity include potential impacts on local ecosystems as well as the high upfront cost required. to build dams, turbines, or other infrastructure needed for this type of system. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to our channel for more videos about off-grid, camping, survival and other interesting topics. For the full article, and more information about off-grid living, survival, camping, and much more, please visit our site and enjoy our articles on these and other topics. Have an amazing day.